"I'm taking half your millions, including your grandmother's estate," Celine announced with a smug grin, her voice echoing through the courtroom like she was reading out lottery numbers. The confidence in her tone made my stomach twist, but I forced myself to remain calm in my seat at the defendant's table. "My name is Silas Holt. I'm 45 years old, and I never imagined I'd be sitting in a divorce court in San Diego, California, watching my wife of 5 years try to steal everything I've worked for my entire life." Celine sat across the room with her attorney, looking like she'd already hit the jackpot. Her expensive dress, one I had paid for, of course, was perfectly tailored, and her golden hair was styled in that way that once charmed me but now made me sick. "Your Honor," Celine's attorney continued, "my client is entitled to half of all marital assets, including the substantial inheritance Mr. Holt received during their marriage." The lawyer's briefcase was stuffed with documents, all of them outlining how Celine planned to walk away with my grandmother's Agnes Holt's hard-earned money. I watched the courtroom spectators lean forward in their seats, clearly fascinated by what they assumed would be a massive financial settlement. Some of them were probably calculating numbers in their heads, wondering how much Celine would walk away with. A few reporters had even shown up, drawn by whispers of a multi-million-dollar divorce case involving a prominent San Diego investor. Judge Marston, a stern man in his 60s with steel-gray hair, reviewed the initial paperwork with a neutral expression. He'd been presiding over family court for over 20 years, and I imagined he'd seen every trick in the book. But something told me he hadn't seen what I was about to reveal. Celine turned slightly in her chair to flash me what she probably thought was a victorious smile. The audacity of it made my blood boil. This was the same woman who once claimed she loved me for who I was, not what I had. 5 years of marriage, and it had all been a lie. The courtroom felt oppressive with its dark wood paneling and the weight of legal proceedings hanging in the air. Outside, I could hear the distant hum of San Diego traffic. People were going about their normal lives while mine was being dissected in front of strangers. I clutched my briefcase tighter, feeling the envelope inside that would change everything. "Mr. Holt," Judge Marston addressed me directly, "do you have any response to these claims?" I stood slowly, my heart pounding, but my resolve stronger than ever. This was the moment I'd been waiting for, the moment when Celine's greed would finally catch up with her. "Your Honor, I believe there's something the court needs to see." Looking back, I should have noticed the warning signs much earlier in our relationship. Celine had swept me off my feet during a particularly vulnerable time in my life. "You must have experienced this, the signals are always there but you don't want to receive them, you have to see them later." I had just turned 40 and was running my investment firm, Holt Innovations, with modest success but little time for romance. My grandmother Agnes Holt had been my closest companion until her death 3 years before I met Celine, and I was still grieving her loss when Celine appeared at a business conference in Los Angeles. She was charming, attentive, and seemed genuinely interested in my work helping tech startups secure funding. "You're brilliant," she'd say, watching me review financial models. "I've never met anyone who understands markets the way you do. I feel like I'm with a younger version of Warren Buffett." At the time, I thought she was impressed by my intelligence. Now, I realized she had been calculating my net worth. Our courtship was a whirlwind of expensive dinners and romantic getaways. Celine worked as a marketing manager for a cosmetics company, but she always seemed to have money for lavish dates. Of course I wanted to pay all of his accounts, but he wouldn't let me, saying he was not financially selfish. "I believe in investing in the people I care about," she'd say when I questioned her spending. I was flattered by her attention and generosity, not realizing she was already planning her long-term investment strategy. After 8 months together, I decided to propose. My grandmother had always warned me about people who moved too fast, and part of me hesitated, but Celine's persistence and charm wore me down. "Life's too short to wait," she often said. "I know what I want, and I want you." So I planned an elaborate proposal, a private dinner on a yacht with a quartet playing soft jazz. I gave her a stunning ring, probably worth more than her annual salary, though I didn't think about that at the time. My attorney, Cole Blake, had insisted on a prenuptial agreement. "Any successful businessman needs protection," had explained. "It's not romantic, but it's practical." ID felt awkward bringing it up with Celine, worried she'd think I didn't trust her or that I cared more about money than love. But Celine's reaction surprised me. She laughed and waved it off like it was nothing. Of course, darling. Whatever makes you comfortable. I'm not marrying you for your money. I'm marrying you for you. She signed the papers without even reading them, joking that love doesn't need fine print. Her casual attitude convinced me that my worries were unfounded. It's just a romantic formality, she'd said, scribbling her signature with a flourish like promising to love, honor, and cherish, but with more legal jargon. I remembered feeling relieved that she was so understanding, so willing to put my concerns at ease. Cole had been thorough in crafting the agreement, protecting not just my existing assets but any future inheritance or business growth. Your grandmother's estate will eventually come to you, had reminded me. This ensures it stays in your family where it belongs. At the time, I thought he was being overly cautious. Now, I realized he had been absolutely right. The real shock came 18 months into our marriage when I received the call about my grandmother's estate. Agnes Holt had left me everything: her house, her investments, her collection of rare books, and $2.8 million in carefully managed funds. It was far more than I had ever expected, and the inheritance transformed my financial situation overnight. Celine's reaction to the news had been telling, though I missed its significance at the time. Her eyes had literally lit up when I told her about the money. 2.8 million, she repeated, as if she couldn't quite believe it. Silas, we're rich. The way she emphasized we should have been my first clue. Celine was like a master stockbroker who saw how many times her investment had paid off and now wanted to sell her shares. She looked like Warren Buffett discovering people, not companies. From that moment forward, Celine's spending habits changed dramatically. She quit her job within 6 months, claiming she wanted to explore new opportunities and be there to support my success. What she actually did was spend my money like it was her personal allowance. She bought a luxury car for networking purposes. She invested in a friend's restaurant without consulting me, losing $30,000 when the business failed within a year. She booked expensive vacations, joined an exclusive country club, and started dressing like she'd always been wealthy. Every time I questioned a purchase, she reminded me that we were partners and that couples should trust each other with financial decisions. The breaking point came 6 months ago when I discovered Celine had been telling people at the country club that the inheritance was family money that belonged to both of us. She had even started introducing herself as an investor and entrepreneur, conveniently forgetting to mention that all her ventures were funded by Agnes Holt's carefully preserved wealth. When I confronted her about her lies and reckless spending, Celine became defensive and then cruel. "You act like it's some big secret that I married up," she snapped. "Everyone knows you needed someone like me to enjoy life. Before we met, you were just a lonely workaholic with no social life." Her words cut deep because there was a grain of truth in them. I had been lonely, and Celine had brought excitement and companionship into my life. Save a loner and get $1 million, what a great job. But now I realized she'd been playing a long game, positioning herself as my savior while systematically planning to claim everything I'd inherited. The final straw came when I found emails between Celine and her attorney discussing divorce strategy. They had been planning this for months, timing it to maximize her potential settlement. Celine had even researched California's divorce laws, looking for ways to claim that her emotional support and lifestyle contributions entitled her to a larger share of my assets. That was when I finally contacted Cole Blake again and filed for divorce myself. I refused to let Celine control the narrative or the timeline. If she wanted to fight over my grandmother's money, then she would get a fight, but it wouldn't go the way she expected. The weeks leading up to the trial felt like living in a war room. Cole and I met again and again, reviewing every single detail. We organized financial statements, gathered proof that my inheritance had always been kept separate, and built a case so airtight there would be no escape for Celine. Some nights I stayed in his office until midnight, running through scenarios, rehearsing testimony, anticipating every possible move her attorney might make. The hardest part wasn't the legal prep, it was knowing that the woman I had once shared a home with had been plotting behind my back all along. Every corner of our house reminded me of betrayal. But instead of breaking me, that pain hardened into resolve. By the time I walked into that courtroom, I wasn't afraid anymore. I carried more than just documents. I carried my grandmother's words, "Protect your legacy, Silas. One day, someone might love it more than they love you." That day had come. And I was ready. Now, standing in that courtroom, I was ready to show Celine and everyone else exactly what her greed had earned her. I reached into my briefcase and withdrew the manila envelope that Cole had prepared for this exact moment. The courtroom was completely silent, except for the soft rustle of paper and the distant hum of the air conditioning system. Celine's confident expression faltered slightly as she watched me approach the judge's bench. "Your Honor," I said, my voice steady and clear, "I believe the court needs to review this document before proceeding with any asset division discussions." Judge Marston extended his hand and accepted the envelope. "What is the nature of this document, Mr. Holt?" "It's a prenuptial agreement, Your Honor. One that my wife signed before our marriage 5 years ago." The change in the courtroom atmosphere was immediate and electric. Celine's attorney, a thin man named Gerald Weston, shot up from his chair like he'd been stung. "Your Honor, we were not made aware of any prenuptial agreement. This is highly irregular." "Sit down, Mr. Weston," Judge Marston commanded, already breaking the seal on the envelope. "I'll examine the documents and determine their validity." I returned to my seat, keeping my eyes focused on Celine. Her face had gone from confident to confused to something approaching panic in the span of 30 seconds. She was whispering frantically to her attorney, gesturing toward the judge's bench. I could make out fragments of her urgent words. She never mentioned. How is this possible? Cole Blake, my attorney, remained perfectly calm beside me. He had been preparing for this moment for months, ensuring every detail of our strategy was foolproof. "Just watch," he whispered to me with a small smile. Judge Marston was a thorough reader, taking his time with each page of the agreement. The document was comprehensive. Cole had made sure of that 5 years ago. It outlined exactly which assets were protected, which debts would remain separate, and most importantly, how any future inheritance would be handled. "This appears to be a properly executed prenuptial agreement," Judge Marston announced after several minutes of careful review. "It's dated 6 weeks before your marriage, witnessed by 2 notaries, and signed by both parties." Celine's attorney, Gerald Weston, looked like he wanted to sink into the floor. He had filed this divorce case without doing basic due diligence. Just like Celine, he had assumed the marriage was a straightforward grab for assets. "Your Honor," Celine suddenly stood up, her voice cracking slightly, "I need to see that document. I don't remember signing anything like that." The judge's eyebrows rose at Celine's outburst. "Mrs. Holt, please remain seated and allow your attorney to handle these proceedings." But Celine was spiraling now, her carefully constructed confidence crumbling. "Silas, what is this? You never told me this was some kind of legal trap." "Mrs. Holt." Judge Marston's voice cut through the courtroom like a whip. "You will remain silent, or I will hold you in contempt. Your attorney may request to review the document through proper channels." Gerald Weston approached the bench with obvious reluctance. I watched him examine the prenuptial agreement, his face growing paler with each page. He returned to his table and began whispering urgently to Celine, who was shaking her head in disbelief. The courtroom spectators were now fully engaged, sensing that something dramatic was unfolding. I could hear muffled conversations and the scratching of reporters' pens as they tried to capture every detail of Celine's public humiliation. "Your Honor," Gerald finally addressed the court, his voice notably lacking its earlier confidence, "my client would like to request a brief recess to review these documents more thoroughly." Judge Marston checked his watch. "Mr. Weston, did you not conduct discovery regarding potential prenuptial agreements before filing your asset claims?" The attorney's silence was answer enough. Celine had been so confident in her strategy that she had never even mentioned the possibility of a prenup to her lawyer. Weston had been blindsided just as much as his client. "I'll give you 10 minutes to review the document," Judge Marston declared. "But I should warn you, this appears to be a legally binding agreement that significantly impacts your client's claims. When court resumed after the recess, Gerald Weston immediately launched into a desperate argument. Your Honor, my client believes she was deceived about the nature of this document. Mr. Holt presented it as a romantic formality, not a comprehensive asset protection agreement. Judge Marston looked distinctly unimpressed. Mr. Weston, are you claiming your client signed a legal document without reading it? Your Honor, my client trusted her husband to be. She believed he was being honest about the document's scope and implications. I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing. Celine had always prided herself on being shrewd and calculated. Now, her attorney was arguing that she had been too naive to read a contract. The document is clearly labeled as a prenuptial agreement, Judge Marston said firmly, flipping through the pages. It includes standard warnings about seeking independent legal counsel. Did your client choose to waive that right? Gerald shuffled nervously through his papers. Why yes, Your Honor. She waived her right to independent counsel, and the document was notarized with her present and confirming her identity. Judge Marston turned his gaze directly to Celine. Mrs. Holt, when you signed this document, did anyone force you to do so? Were you under any kind of duress or coercion? Celine's face flushed red. No, Your Honor, but I thought it was just paperwork. Silas made it sound like it didn't matter. Did you read the document before signing it? The question hung in the air like a blade. Celine shifted uncomfortably in her seat, glancing around as if searching for an escape route. I skimmed it, she finally admitted, but Silas said it was just a formality. Judge Marston's expression hardened. Mrs. Holt, you signed a legal document without reading it, after waiving your right to legal counsel, and now you expect this court to invalidate it because you didn't take it seriously? The courtroom was silent, reporters frozen mid-note, as Celine squirmed under the weight of the judge's words. I feel like kissing the judge on the cheeks at those moments. Judge Marston cleared his throat and began reading directly from the prenuptial agreement, his voice carrying through the silent courtroom. Section 4, Paragraph A, all assets owned by either party prior to marriage shall remain the separate property of that party. Section 4, Paragraph B, any inheritance received by either party during the marriage shall be considered separate property and shall not be subject to division upon divorce. Celine's face shifted from red to pale in seconds. She gripped the edge of the table so hard her knuckles turned white. That can't be legal, she muttered, loud enough for several people to hear. Section 6, Judge Marston continued firmly, addresses spousal support. Quote, neither party shall be entitled to alimony or spousal support from the other, regardless of the length of the marriage or the disparity in income. He looked up from the document, his expression razor-sharp. This section was initialed by both parties and witnessed separately. Gerald Weston was scribbling notes furiously, desperate to find a loophole, but Cole Blake had been too thorough 5 years ago. Every potential challenge had been anticipated and addressed. I stood up slowly. Your Honor, may I address the court? Proceed, Mr. Holt. When I inherited my grandmother's estate 18 months ago, I consulted with my attorney regarding the prenuptial agreement. We confirmed that the inheritance was fully protected under Section 4, Paragraph B. The funds have been kept in separate accounts and were never commingled with marital assets. It was the final nail in Celine's coffin. Not only was the prenup airtight, but I had been scrupulous in keeping Agnes Holt's legacy completely separate. There was no way Celine could touch a single dollar of it. Celine suddenly exploded. That's not true. He bought things for us, he paid for vacations. Mrs. Holt. Judge Marston's voice was ice cold. You are out of order. Sit down immediately. But Celine was beyond reason now. Her carefully crafted facade had crumbled completely. This is insane. I've been with him for 5 years. I supported him emotionally. I gave up my career. You quit your job to spend my money, I said quietly, unable to help myself. Mr. Holt, Judge Marston warned, though there was a flicker of amusement in his tone. Gerald Weston tugged desperately at Celine's arm, trying to get her to sit down, but she was in full meltdown mode, her true nature on display for everyone to see. He trapped me. Celine shouted. He made me think we were partners. He let me believe that money was ours. Mrs. Holt, if you cannot control yourself, I will have the bailiff remove you from my courtroom, Judge Marston snapped. The threat of being physically removed finally cut through her rage. Celine collapsed into her seat, chest heaving with angry breaths, but the damage was already done. Everyone in the courtroom had witnessed her unraveling the greedy, entitled woman who had married me for my money and now tried to play the victim when her scheme collapsed. The atmosphere in the room shifted completely. Reporters scribbled frantically, spectators whispered, and I sat back with a calm I hadn't felt in years. Judge Marston reviewed the final pages of the prenuptial agreement with deliberate care. The tension in the room was palpable as everyone waited for his ruling. Based on my review of this prenuptial agreement, he announced, removing his glasses, I am ready to render my decision on asset division. He looked directly at Celine, his expression cold and unyielding. Mrs. Holt, this prenuptial agreement is valid, comprehensive, and legally binding. You are entitled to exactly nothing from your husband's premarital assets, inheritance, or business holdings. The words hit Celine like a physical blow. Her mouth opened in disbelief. Nothing? She whispered. Nothing, Judge Marston confirmed firmly. Furthermore, according to Section 7 of this agreement, all debts incurred individually by either party remain the responsibility of that party. Mr. Holt, do you have documentation of debts incurred solely by your wife? Cole Blake handed me a thick folder, which I passed to the bailiff. Yes, Your Honor. Credit card debts, the car loan, the failed restaurant investment, and country club fees totaling approximately $87,000. Celine's attorney looked like he wanted to vanish. What had begun as a case promising millions had turned into a disaster. Mrs. Holt, Judge Marston continued, not only will you receive no assets from this marriage, but you remain personally responsible for $87,000 in debt that you accumulated during the marriage. The courtroom erupted in whispers. I heard someone stifle a laugh behind me. Celine had gone from expecting millions to staring down bankruptcy in less than 30 minutes. Your Honor. Her voice trembled. 5 years of marriage has to count for something. Judge Marston's smile was razor sharp. It does, Mrs. Holt. It counts as an expensive lesson in reading legal documents before signing them. The gavel came down like a thunderclap. The court grants the divorce petition filed by Mr. Holt. No assets shall be transferred to Mrs. Holt. All individual debts remain with the party who incurred them. This court is adjourned. Celine sat frozen in her chair as the reality of her situation sank in. She had spent 5 years positioning herself for this moment, only to discover that her plan had been doomed from the day she casually signed the prenuptial agreement without reading it. People began filing out of the courtroom, but I remained seated for a moment, watching Celine's world collapse around her. Gerald Weston was already stuffing his briefcase, eager to escape the humiliation of a case that had turned into a professional disaster. Reporters tried to approach me, but Cole intercepted them with practiced efficiency. Silas, Celine finally called out as I stood to leave. We need to talk about this. This isn't over. I turned to face her one last time. Celine, it was over the moment you decided to marry me for my money instead of loving me for who I am. The prenuptial agreement didn't ruin your plan. Your greed did. Her face crumpled as the full weight of her downfall hit her. No inheritance, no assets, and $87,000 in crushing debt that would follow her for years. In the months that followed, Celine's life unraveled completely. The debt forced her into bankruptcy within 6 months, destroying her credit and making it impossible to maintain the lifestyle she had once flaunted. Her reputation in San Diego's business community was ruined when word spread about how she had tried to steal her husband's inheritance, making her a cautionary tale about prenuptial agreements and the dangers of marrying for money. The country club revoked her membership when she couldn't pay her dues, the luxury car was repossessed, and she was left dependent on public transportation. Her dating life became non-existent as women in our social circles warned each other about the gold digger whose marriage had been nothing more than a business transaction. Eventually, Celine moved back in with her aging parents in Fresno, forced to take a modest retail job just to survive. As for me, I used a portion of my protected inheritance to establish the Agnes Holt Foundation, which provides legal assistance to men and women seeking prenuptial agreements and divorce representation, ensuring that others wouldn't fall victim to financial predators like Celine. Looking back on my journey from naive husband to empowered survivor, I realized that my grandmother's wisdom about protecting family wealth had saved me from more than financial loss. It had saved me from a lifetime of being used by someone who saw my love as nothing more than a path to easy money. If you have listened so far, please show yourself and tell me how you would behave if you were in my shoes.